I want to talk about this moon thing. What is this guy's deal? Hidden deep under the MCM facility wanders a mysterious entity, endlessly patrolling its own Minotaur's labyrinth. Emitting a gentle nightlight glow, it soothes an unknown soul to sleep with Brahms' lullaby. I find this thing very fascinating. So I'm going to explore some of the quirks around it and maybe offer some insight or new angles. I kind of throw my hat into the ring of the conversation around this thing. So right from the start, Secret of the Mimic establishes that the moon character is a separate special symbol within the game's events. He has a program that is specifically named for him, moon.exe, in which he plays an antagonistic role and is heavily implied to represent Edwin Murray himself. There is the giant moon prop from the Storytime showroom, fallen somehow through 2 entire floors and taunting us from the abyss. Aside from this, there are character posters and the odd blueprint of the actual moon suit found scattered around various places throughout the facility. So you only bump up against Moon in these sorts of fleeting elbow brushes, small impressions after which he is forgotten again. And this sort of builds up a sense of import and mystery around this character, which ultimately culminates in 2 ways. The most straightforward way is in moon.exe, where you slowly overcome him and, depending on your reading, help to put him back together and lead him to peace. The second culmination is an actual physical encounter with Moon, and this is where most of the questions that I want to explore come into play. Because here is where a lot of things start to become confusing, and that's the fun part. At the point that I finally reached the elevator down to Moon's basement, I was already sort of expecting to see him, but after encountering Moon in the computer and realizing that he represents Edwin, and then actually seeing the character itself clumsily lumbering around in the dark, jingle-jangling and singing to itself, some questions rushed to the forefront of my mind. The obvious ones. What is it? Who is it? Is it M2 again? That would be reasonable. Is it the remnant zombie of a night shift worker that was stuck down there? Is it a separate animatronic? Is it the corpse of Edwin Murray forcefully stuffed into the one character that represented him? Maybe it's a ghostly projection or something else entirely. And, what about the lone, broken star orphan? Why is Moon down here, and what does that represent within the entire overall narrative? Secret of the Mimic, more than any FNAF game before it, does not shy away from allegory and symbolism. Surely if Moon represents something in moon.exe, then its lonely presence here in this pitch dark maze means something as well. I don't have any solid answers, but I want to explore this topic and maybe get just a little bit closer to understanding what is perhaps the most classically FNAF obtuse mystery in the entire game. Now, I wasn't being facetious earlier in comparing this trial to the Minotaur's Labyrinth. Throughout my ordeal with Moon, it struck me that there were many potential parallels that could be drawn here, whether they're intentional or not. A large, dark maze throughout which prowls its sole deadly occupant. Interestingly, the Minotaur's name is Asterion, which roughly means Starry One. A convenient fit with Moon's lunar imagery and association with the Star Orphans, don't you think? The Minotaur also lived on human flesh, and while I'm not going to draw any conclusions with that fact here, I bring it up because you can draw lines between human victims and remnant stuff if you're feeling so inclined. The Minotaur mythically symbolize the struggle between our human intellect and our more primal animalistic side. It's a warning about the destructive potential of your unchecked desires and hubris, the dangers of giving in to your baser urges without considering the consequences, the dangers of skirting and crossing moral and ethical lines. Does that sound like anyone we know? In the context of psychological archetypes, the Minotaur represents our shadow self, the parts of ourselves that we don't let out, that we are afraid to face, but nonetheless are there, and if not tended to, will come out in some form. Often, these are feelings like rage, shame, or guilt.
All this time wasted? I should have been having fun with him, playing games and teaching him how to make things. But I didn't.
The labyrinth itself is a form of becoming trapped by your own circumstances, particularly ones that you have created yourself. All things heavily associated with Edwin Murray's story. There are more mythical parallels. The trip to the basement can be seen as a plunge into the underworld. Now, traditionally, this would be our player character Arnold's journey to the underworld to face his demons, but FNAF does a funny thing with its storytelling. Whoever you are playing as is, more often than not, tangential to the narrative. This game is not Arnold's journey. He has nothing to fix. He has no grand personal struggle to overcome. He has no inner lessons to learn, other than pick better employers.
Amazing. We'll look into it.
He is simply a poor soul on the bad end of other people's decisions. Arnold's tale is much more of a survival story than anything else, and he just so happens to affect change as a matter of course. But that change was going to happen anyway. If not with Arnold, then with a bulldozer. However, because of this storytelling method, the Five Nights at Freddy's series also does an interesting thing in order to tell its story. The FNAF games tend to have you walk through someone else's memories, a way of unveiling why the situation that you are dealing with has come about. Memories are extremely important in the FNAF universe. They are an essential piece of a person's soul. Memories can attach to people. They can attach to places, to objects. Throughout Secret of the Mimic, all you are doing the entire time is wandering through the wreckage of the memories that both bless and plague the MCM facility. The strongest illustration of this concept, I think, is in Moon.exe itself. This is an adventure throughout a nebulous, metaphorical combination of Edwin, Fiona, David, and M2's memories, feelings, and experiences. The collectibles that you find around the facility are saturated with memories. These memories attached to these objects then have an effect within that very program. With all that being said, I propose that finding the basement is symbolically a journey to the underworld, except that Arnold is stumbling into Edwin's underworld, and that is why we have a more Promethean role here, of sneaking in, getting what we need, and sneaking out. There is no grand confrontation, no closure to this encounter. We grab David's ball, and then we leave, leaving Edwin's personal demon behind, a being that represents the father he was to his child, the worst side of himself, and the fate that he brought upon himself, trapped below, locked away, and deliberately forgotten. We could go further. Given what we see in game, poor David had no friends. He only ever knew his mom, dad, and the factory workers. Edwin is shown, at least in part, to have created inventions to help Fiona be a comfortable housewife, and part of that was making friends for David to play with. The commercial for the Cleanovac shows that it was designed deliberately as a companion, as well as for housework. It's not such a stretch to apply this to his other inventions. They all have a companionship aspect of some kind. Every one of them. In this way, he can avoid feeling guilty for neglecting his relationships in favor of his inventing. It was his broken way of showing love. This flaw of Edwin's went so far as to build an automated bedtime storyteller for David. Would it be such a reach that among his sleepy storytime line of products, alongside glowing nightlight plushy star-shaped friends, that he would create a moon which shares that gentle bedtime glow and sings his son lullabies in his absence? Take this trivia for what you will, but Moon's lullaby is sung by Edwin's voice actor, Jim Meskimen. Could mean nothing, but it's something to keep in mind here. I'm sure we could drive this metaphorical, allegorical train much farther, but now I want to move on to some of the more concrete ideas. So, enough of the symbolism. Let's tackle the question of who or what Moon is in a literal sense. It seems to me that there are a few core ideas that most people agree on as the strongest candidates, so I'm going to explore some of these and give my thoughts. Possibility number 1. Moon is M2 all along. This is an absolutely rock-solid, reasonable assumption to make, given the entire game up to that point has been solely M2 chasing us, with the only questionable instance being the White Tiger. And maybe pre-chase Big Top, or Dolly before she's ripped off her tracks. And then there's the cupcakes, and the hand puppets, and then later the proto-mimics. But other than that, it's all M2. Anyway, the point is that this is a very understandable thing to think, that Moon would be M2. It stomps around as if it is very heavy, just like M2. M2 has easy access to the basement, and was in the room directly above. It's not like it's uncommon in this game to go from one room to the next and wonder exactly how the heck did you get here so fast. However, I think the evidence against this is pretty compelling. My first point is that M2 never sings the lullaby, ever. Later in the game, as the Amalgam, M2 repeats phrases from every character he has pretended to be throughout the night. And even before that, as you roam around the facility, you hear M2 repeating phrases it has heard other people say, like some giant murderous parrot. But it never copies this lullaby, ever. This would seem to imply that it has never heard the melody to begin with, which, if this is the case, raises questions about exactly how long Moon has been around. Possibly before the construction of the Mimic, but at minimum, Moon probably went missing before M2 ever saw it. Primarily, this lack of lullaby is evidence that M2 doesn't even know about this thing. If that's not good enough for you, listen to this. Did you hear that? M2 sounds exactly like you'd expect. The whirring of electric motors, servos, and pneumatics. Now listen to this. If you can listen past the jingle of his bells, Moon sounds much more like primitive clockwork-style machinery, much more like a wind-up toy, the winding and cranking of gears and pulleys. In fact, it sounds like much older machinery to me, maybe even early animatronic puppet work. The sounds in Moon match those heard from the Helpfuls, which are basic animatronic puppets.
Can't enter without a ticket.
It's almost as if you can hear a little bit of the proto-mimics rattling around there as well, but that's harder to pinpoint. There are mechanisms here, but none of them sound like M2. What does this imply? It's hard to be sure, but I do wonder if it might point to the Moon suit blueprints being a red herring, and that the Moon we encounter is a storytime show animatronic, only now maybe animated by the errant remnant of an unlucky soul. Possibility number 2. Moon is Edwin Murray. This one is also very understandable. Edwin is represented by Moon, after all, and we have no idea what happened to him after the explosion. The most we know is his legs were maimed or blown off.
I can't move. I can't feel my legs.
If Edwin died, M2 was there with him. M2 could have grabbed Edwin, tracked all the way back to the factory, dragging Edwin's lame body through the convoluted maze of Murray's costume manor and down into the basement to finally stuff him into the moon suit. M2 proved it can build legs, so why couldn't it fashion some sort of mechanical prosthetic to put over or replace Edwin's legs? It's revealed, after activating the parachute protocol, that M2 tries to find a costume it feels is most fitting for its victims.
Now it's your turn to play dress up. When he catches you, which one will he choose? Who are you deep down inside?
Well, what better suit than the very character which most represents Edwin? M2 has likely not seen a possession lead to animation at this point, or at least it's not likely to have registered a possession as anything remarkable. Of course, M2 doesn't have to be involved at all. If there is some sort of custom animatronic puppetry inside Moon, then it could just as easily be a piece of Edwin's spirit attached to it and animating a suit which holds significance to him. My main problems with this idea is both how convoluted the series of events would have to have been and how unceremoniously such a truth bomb would have been handled. Edwin being Moon is a huge revelation, and it would have had no more fanfare than accidentally stumbling over a pebble. The only thing that makes this section special is character buildup, location, and its unique encounter. This doesn't mean the idea is wrong, of course. Again, in FNAF, you always sort of play up against the side of the actual story. You're either there well after the big things have occurred, or you're off to the side of them, only catching glimpses. It wouldn't be out of character for the series to put such a big truth in such a quiet place. Possibility number 3. Moon is the night shift employee. In the basement, we find a message that reads as follows. Hey, is anybody up there? I'm stuck down here. The elevator isn't working and I'm getting really hungry. Is anyone getting this message? This is all we get. There is no follow-up. There doesn't appear to be a corpse anywhere in the basement. The only other mention of a night shift employee is a possibly fraudulent customer complaint, and the only other mention of an employee in a basement is referring to the tunnels where we encounter the white tiger. The game is attempting to lead our assumptions in one of two ways. Either this poor guy was trapped down here with Moon, or this poor guy became Moon. Maybe he is some kind of remnant zombie, like Michael Afton. Why that would lead him into putting on the suit, I have no idea. But I have seen people try to say that he was the person wearing the suit when it fell into the basement, or even sillier, that he is still alive in there and has just gone mad. However, I am dismissing the first idea as unnecessarily convoluted, and I'm dismissing the second idea as absolutely insane. But the idea that it is the worker, either in body, spirit, or both, is a very reasonable assumption. I've just got a few little problems tickling my brain here. There's uneaten food down there. Don't you think a starving person would leave no snack uneaten? His message seems to imply that the elevator being down was an unexpected turn of events. It's a running gag throughout the game that Edwin was terrible at making reliable elevators, and it is implied multiple times that people have very often had to wait extended periods of time before someone would come around to notice and fix the thing and let them out. Sometimes this doesn't end well, as Fiona helpfully shows us that they have contingency messages for these occasions. If the employee were down there doing who knows what project and got stuck, he either didn't know that they were planning on locking down the basement, or this was the usual unintended elevator malfunction. It could be that this poor guy actually managed to get out. Because here's the thing, we don't find a corpse down there. There is food down there. And the elevator that we ride isn't shut down. The door to reach it is locked, but the elevator is perfectly functional. Meaning our anonymous author would have been able to ride up and bang on the door until someone noticed, but he doesn't, because the elevator was down for him. Whenever his message was written, it was before the basement lockdown. This leaves us with a few possibilities. He was found, rescued, and went home, weak, dehydrated, and hungry, but otherwise fine. There would be no need to write more messages surrounding an annoying, unfortunate mishap at work. Or he died in the basement and was later found with the lockdown coming at some other date. Or maybe he was found in the basement before he died, found by something prowling in the dark. Something that forced Edwin to lock down the basement. If we return upstairs for a moment, Clarence, one of the employees in the retail showroom, bored from sitting in a merchandise storefront that rarely gets customers, gets curious and goes snooping. He tries to get into the old basement elevator, wondering what is down there, and when he finally does, he encounters something that terrifies him enough to lock it back up and implore his coworker to never open it again. What is odd to me about this is that Clarence, a worker familiar with the characters, costumes, and animatronics of MCM, would describe what he saw as something. He doesn't mention that there's a maniac wearing the Moon suit, or Moon has gone crazy. No, he calls it something. He treats it like a creature, and whatever this encounter with this something was, it was harrowing enough that it left him unsure if the elevator and door would hold it back. Oddly, he still gives out the code and implies it's worth opening in a life or death situation. I have no idea what that's about, but when we encounter Moon, it isn't extremely fast. It doesn't seem particularly more persistent or violent than anything else we've already dealt with. In fact, Moon seems a bit clumsy. If Clarence did encounter Moon, there's no way he got close enough to know that it would try to hurt him. And even if it did, why wouldn't he assume it was a person or a robot in there? So no, whatever Clarence saw, it was not Moon. At least not at this point. Whatever Clarence saw was much more dangerous. After all, he says, "Have mercy on our souls if that thing ever gets out." Now, I didn't intend the video to go this way, but putting words to these thoughts has led me to an interesting possibility that I am struggling to ignore. I was initially going to say that I'm not sure that the Moon prop fell until after the lockdown was in effect, and I'm almost entirely convinced of that. And I was going to go down the various implications of that possibility, but then some thoughts came together, and I've got to get them out. Here's my idea. There are parallels between both basements. First off, they're basements. Real mind blower there, I know. Second, both basements are the only place to have star orphans and pedestals that seem to use the star orphans to channel energy of some sort. I don't know, perhaps they act as circuit switches, or like I suggested earlier, remnant batteries. Of note, basement 2 is the White Tiger basement, has a hidden workshop where we see various attempts at making the mimic Endo. It is implied that this is where Edwin had his first major breakthrough in that regard, though I think the general interpretation about what that breakthrough actually was is wrong, but that's for another time. If you look at basement 1, we see a bit of a hidden workshop down there as well. It's just not as robust. Within the Moon prop itself, there seems to be a makeshift workshop, including a remnant pump. Why this would be, or how it came to be, I do not know. It would presumably had to have been installed after the fall, but maybe it was already in the Moon, and that's what made it so heavy. There are large pipes broken where the Moon presumably hung. Anyway, the little break room down there would also be useful in this capacity of workshop, complete with the mailbox, the computer, and the inventory system. There's an odd note on the desk which appears to be a report of conflicting memories, with heavy implications of childbirth gone wrong. M1, F10N4 tells Edwin that M2 wasn't her. It was different. Somehow it has been damaged and is malfunctioning. The note says, but something was different. I felt wrong somehow. Was I me? Which is very interesting similar language here. Could it be that Edwin also used this basement in his mimic experiments? Like, we have no in-gameplay connection between the two basements, but they are physically close. It's not inconceivable that there is some sort of connection between them in universe. It would explain the location of the memory error note. It's not likely that M1 or M2 wrote that themselves. So I'm trying very hard not to fanfic here, but I gotta explore this line. So perhaps after becoming enraged with M2 and destroying its legs, Edwin throws M2 into basement 1 and locks it away to forget about it forever. Only, oops, there's still an employee down here. Maybe he was napping on the couch in the break room, or maybe he was off in one of the tunnels working on the pipes. Either way, he eventually realizes that the elevator is down, probably when the next shift doesn't show up, and he messages for help. But he never had a chance, because in the dark with him is a newly rage-infused M2. The employee plays cat and mouse for a little while, long enough that he put a bucket on the head of the mannequin in the break room to avoid setting it off and drawing attention. Eventually, though, we have to assume that he succumbs. Why or how he succumbs is unclear, but at this point, we would have a remnant and rage-infused robot, M2, which creates, potentially, a remnant-infused corpse. With nowhere to stuff him, M2 leaves him to rot, or maybe wears him, Ennard style. Could Clarence have seen this? Or could he have seen a remnant zombie? Or more likely, did he see M2 violently scurrying around in the dark looking for prey? Maybe he even saw the body of the night shift employee at the same time, kind of increasing the threat factor. In any case, the moon prop does eventually end up in the basement. M2, playing as Edwin, can use that makeshift workshop to fashion itself new legs and crawl out of the massive hole in the ceiling, looking for his father. Have mercy on our souls, if that thing ever gets out. A couple of alternate possibilities arise here that I want to lay out as food for thought, and then I'll leave it at that for now. Did M2 shove the body of the employee into the moon? Maybe the possession didn't activate for a while, which is why M2 never heard the lullaby. Or perhaps M2 fashioned some working internals for the moon suit. We see that M2 can competently build legs for itself. It can also cobble together semi-sentient bots, even if they aren't great construction. The sounds that Moon makes sort of match that interpretation, so perhaps Moon is a proto-mimic. Maybe inside Moon is an old robotic puppet, once used to tell bedtime stories and sing lullabies. Or even maybe it's an early attempt at creating the mimic, unknown to the world, finally given the missing ingredient to make it work. The one thing that Edwin couldn't figure out, the lost employee's soul. You know, maybe the suit fell down with the moon prop, landing on this employee's body, or near enough that it possesses it. Or maybe it is Edwin after all, brought back down, trapped in the same dungeon he left his own orphan to rot in, given clockwork legs, his soul doomed to wander forever as the one symbol that fit David's memories best. But I don't know. There are still a lot of questions around this. This is a very fresh mystery. There's not as much to go on at the moment as we would probably like. And I kind of bounce around. I bounce back and forth between interpretations as I think of things. And then I'll think of contradictions and then bounce to another interpretation. I think I'm probably leaning... I really like the idea that Mimic crawls out of the hole, like he's trapped down there, he is locked down there, and the way it escapes and becomes dangerous and is able to sneak up on Edwin is because it was able to build itself new legs down there and then get out of this hole that was never intended to be there. That's very poetic. And the game is full of tragic irony, and that would be a very ironically tragic series of events. It would also help justify how Edwin could be in Moon. You know, it would give M2 a real reason to throw him down there. Whereas, without that motive, it's just kind of a convoluted series of events. Well, anyway, that's going to wrap it up, I think. And it's probably definitely not the last time I'm going to tackle this subject. It's the most classically FNAF obtuse mystery of the entire game, I think. At least it's one of them. And I'm really curious about where people's thoughts are going to go on this in the future and where we'll end up landing as a general consensus. Because I don't think we're there yet. We still have to figure out these damn star orphans. And the one in Moon's basement is missing an eye. What's that about? And there's still more things to tackle here. So I'm real curious where that's going to go.